All right. Well, I think it's about time. I'll get this show on the road. You know, the faster I wrap up here, the faster I can get back to the other Evangelion panel. That was a really interesting one. Hey, I'm Kevin. I run a website called Mazer Patrol, and I'm gonna confess I'm not the biggest Evangelion fan, but I've seen Evangelion, and I've also seen things that aren't Evangelion. So that's something that can actually be really helpful in looking at the series and sort of unpacking all of the sometimes confusing things that are going on. Like, why would they do this? Well, maybe sometimes it's just fan service. So, you know, to get things started, I figured this was the iconic image that everybody, when they understand a reference, they think of Captain America. But this has nothing to do with Evangelion, so I added a little Kaoru in his fist for him to squeeze.
It is.
I understand that reference.
So, not to throw shade on other panelists, but sort of the inspiration for this was one year I was at an Evangelion panel, and people were talking about the monster from episode 5, Ramiel, where just, can you believe they did this monster that's just a geometric crystal shape that transforms? I mean, that's so original and innovative. And I was just sitting there like,
no, it's not.
But yeah, we had this in a decade earlier in Future Police Urashiman. There was a monster that was a big transforming crystal, and then a decade before that in Return of Ultraman, and a decade before that in Ultraman, and a decade before that in the Monolith Monsters. So it's a thing that's been around the block a little bit, this concept. And Hideaki Anno, the creator of Evangelion, he was a big fan of Ultraman, as we'll get into as we talk about the series. So the thing that a lot of people don't realize about Evangelion is that it is basically a big tribute pop culture remix. And I've got a couple of examples here of similar things that people look at and they're like, oh, this is unique and innovative and original. And I'm like, yeah, but there are also callbacks to previous things that are like visually distinctive there. And this doesn't mean that you can't enjoy the things that are on the top row. I love all of those series, but I think I get actually more of them when I'm watching it. I'm like, they just referenced Abba Ranger or something like that. So by nature of this panel, I gotta say, there will be spoilers for Evangelion. So I'm assuming everyone here has seen or doesn't care about spoilers.
Don't care.
Evangelion has exceeded the spoiler limit. You haven't seen anything.
That's a healthy attitude to take. So same thing for not just Evangelion, but then all other media because of the nature of this. So if you come up to me afterwards and like, you ruined the ending of Devilman, I'm like, oh, sorry. So the creator of Evangelion, as I mentioned before, is a huge nerd. You know, here he is as a teenager in his custom-made Kamen Rider cosplay. Through college, he basically made fan films of Ultraman, and he dressed up himself as the giant hero that fights monsters and did fan films. And then retroactively, those fan films were purchased. They purchased the rights from the company that makes Ultraman, and now these fan films are canon. So that's reach for the stars, kids, and someday your fan fiction too can be acknowledged. Now, Anno is a mastermind. He gets most of the credit, but he has a partner in crime, so to speak, is this guy Shinji Higuchi that works together with Anno on most of his projects. He did the storyboards on Evangelion, for an example. The main character, Shinji, in Evangelion is named after Shinji Higuchi. And as nerds, they got their start with these beautiful fan films for the Daicon conventions in Osaka. And it's basically just a giant mashup of like, hey, here's this little girl, she's gonna fight the power armor from Starship Troopers and fight Darth Vader and fly past superheroes, and you watch and it's just boom, 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 reference, 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 reference. And I think this really set the template for what their further works are gonna be like. Because when you start to really take a look at future Gainax properties, you have stuff like Gunbuster, which the name is a reference to, the Japanese title is Aim for the Top, Gunbuster, which is a reference to the American movie Top Gun and the tennis series Aim for the Ace. with some Starship Troopers mixed into the blend. And that basically is how the series come to be. Is it still a great series? Absolutely. It is a wonderful OVA. Everyone should watch it, but it's also sort of a remix. And this progresses. You have their big television breakthrough is Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, which is nominally 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, except they throw in Octagon and Yatterman and some Gunbuster references just for good measure. Nadia is particularly significant in terms of its relationship to Evangelion because there's a lot of things that would carry over. For one, Ultraman references. It turns out the secret of Blue Water is that she's actually an alien from planet M78, which is where Ultraman is from. And these ancient aliens were creating a giant humanoid called Adam, which Evangelion, that's a big plot point there. There's some aesthetic similarities to, the bridge in the Nautilus and the bridge in the third Rebuild movie, very similar. You have a, nefarious, scheming character that likes to sit with his hands all crazy-like. And even the main character's character design, Yoshiyuki Sadamoto, the character designer, says, like, hey, if you want to draw Shinji, just draw Nadia and then tweak it a little bit. And if you want to get a whole backstory about the origins of Gainax, they put it right in Evangelion as on-screen text. They just changed the word here or there, so they have Geharon instead of Gainax and things like that. But yeah, we were talking about the giant cube monster, and in this episode they have something called Operation Yashima, which is a plan where they channel electricity from all of Japan together into one new weapon that they can use to shoot at this transforming monster and destroy it. And you describe that, that sounds to me a lot like the plot of Godzilla vs. Hedorah from 1971. They build these big electrodes, they channel all the electricity from across Japan and put it together there. And this is something that Anno later revisits because he did his own Godzilla movie in 2016 where he took Operation Yashima. He has in that movie Operation Yashiori, which is again all of humanity pools their resources to defeat Godzilla. So it's sort of a weird circle. And Shin Godzilla is something that I would say Evangelion fans should check out. There's a whole lot of overlap, so to speak. So Anno has a type of girl. He likes this foreign, red-headed, sort of a fierce, feisty character, which you can see in Gunbuster, and then in Eva, and then in Shin Godzilla. Same composer did the music for both. So they actually did concerts where they would play a little bit of Shin Godzilla music, a little bit of Evangelion music. I'm sure they were sort of like being sneaky with it, like, ha ha ha, can you tell the difference? So, there's a significant overlap there, and then, of course, this means a significant overlap in terms of merchandise. So you might see these weird Evangelion figures and be like, well, why does the Eva look like that? Or why is Rey dressed like this? And this is, again, one of those things of like, well, this is a crossover. It's multi-references, so if you know why the scientist has an eye patch, as a reference to the original Godzilla, and Asuka has an eye patch, it's synergy. And I will talk anyone's ear off about Godzilla, so I should probably get off this topic. One of the cameos that Anno put into Shin Godzilla was this director Kihachi Okamoto, who is one of his favorites. So an example of Okamoto's influence on Anno is the movie Japan's Longest Day, which is a World War II movie, but it has all of this. Every time somebody shows up on screen, it tells you your full title, their full name, anytime there's a new location or new piece of military hardware. This is something that Anno loves. So if you watch the 1.01 or 2.02 versions of the Rebuild movies, there's all this on-screen text, and that's sort of where he got the seed of that idea. Another one of Okamoto's World War II movies is Battle of Okinawa, which is very, very brutal. And this was a direct inspiration for the whole raiding scene in End of Evangelion, particularly the flamethrowers, which if you think about, like, why would they be using flamethrowers in these crowded hallways? This seems like a bad idea. And it was just purely done as a visual nod. Okamoto also has a science fiction movie. It's called Blood Type Blue. This is a sort of a nihilistic, well, it's a 70s science fiction movie, so of course it's nihilistic, movie about aliens that come down to Earth, and they select a small portion of the human race and they turn their blood blue. So suddenly you have a new minority group to be persecuted, and humanity just sort of tears itself apart. And as an homage to this, in Evangelion, the way that they identify that, oh, this thing is the angel, this is the other, is they have a call out on the screen that says blood type blue, so you know that this is the thing that you need to fight. So that's all of the Okamoto stuff that I have, but I figured we can keep the ball rolling on in terms of like apocalyptic Japanese science fiction, because this is the stuff that Anno and Higuchi really grew up on. So an example here, an early one, is Goke the Body Snatcher from Hell. This is not about a creature that's from hell, it's just a liberal name, but basically it's aliens that take over human bodies through the slit in the forehead. And you get a very similar visual image in End of Evangelion. And you can say, oh, this is a coincidence, except Shinji Higuchi actually does the audio commentary on the Goke the Body Snatcher DVD and calls it out as an inspiration. Another little Easter egg from another apocalyptic science fiction movie is Japan Sinks. This is a movie where there's big earthquakes, the ocean swallows the country. You can see there's a little nod in the episode where Shinji goes to the movie theater. It actually, up here, says, the world sinks, and then it says Japan right there. So it's definitely a call out that people would be like, aha, they couldn't actually have him seeing that movie, but they could play around with it. So Japan Sinks actually got a remake in 2006, directed by Shinji Higuchi. And Japan doesn't sink in that movie. They save the day at the end by detonating bombs at the tectonic plates to prevent the earthquakes. The new bombs that they come up with are called N2 mines. So in this movie, the day is literally saved by Evangelion references. All right, another piece of apocalyptic Japanese science fiction that is well known, especially after the excellent new Netflix series that just came out, is Devilman. And at first, these two things might not seem so similar, but I'll just sort of go through some of the plot beats. Again, spoilers here. So in Devilman, you get it starts with in the future. There's the Himalayas. Some ancient creature is unearthed that kicks off an apocalypse. This sounds like Evangelion to me. Main character has a love interest, gets stabbed through the head, and causes a freak out. All right. Another love interest turns into a weird monster thing with many, many wings. And the whole thing ends with the main character and somebody named Asuka on the beach as the only characters left alive. So Devilman was a big influence on a lot of series. For an example, Clamped X. But the funny thing is, there was the remake recently, and suddenly the Devilman remake is taking stuff from Evangelion, like this shot of the character being very calm behind a window as somebody's punching against it, or this bit with the dead cat was taken from the Evangelion manga. Another little Easter egg, Misato's always drinking this Boa brand beer. So Boa juice is a fictional beverage that was introduced in the movie Flying Phantom Ship. It's one of the Toei Doga films. You can see it's even the Kuroshio company on both of these labels. So Boa juice, you probably don't want to drink too much, because over the course of the movie you find out that if you drink this, you turn into liquid. You're liquefied. So Misato should really, avoid doing that, or else, oh god, too late. So, on Flying Phantom Ship, one of the animators was this guy named Hayao Miyazaki, and I've been told that he went on to direct movies of his own. One of these movies was Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind, which Anno was in turn brought on as an animator for, and that was one of Anno's first gigs. And there's a lot of visual similarities between the Evangelion units and the God Warriors from Nausicaa. You know, Anno specifically was responsible for animating those God Warriors in the movie. To the point where he actually went back later in life and did a live action short with one of these God Warriors attacking Tokyo. That's not the only similarity between the two. We've got things like this bit where a character is cradling a doll and thinking of it as her own child when she's lost her mind. So there's other little tidbits here and there throughout that. There were other inspirations for the Evangelion units also. One that gets called out a lot is Shadow Town by Daijiro Morohoshi. This is also an influence for Attack on Titan, where you have just the image of these hulking creatures reaching down and attacking. But I think a big source of inspiration that we need to unpack quite a bit is the Ultraman series, which I called out earlier. We knew it was coming. I'm giving an Ultraman panel tomorrow, so if you're more interested on that, you can come by and see what I have to say there. So, Ultraman is an institution in Japan. It's been going for over 50 years. It's the longest running science fiction series, according to the Guinness Book of World Records. And it's basically giant humans fighting monsters and alien invaders. And Gainax isn't afraid to admit this. They do things like this piece of art that portrays Evangelion as though it's all just rubber suits shot through traditional tokusatsu special effects. And it's not obvious at first, but the more you look at it, the more sort of similarities you can see. You know, both the Evangelion and the Ultraman are 40 meters tall. They both have this sort of slouched over type of stance when they fight against monsters. Both of them are bioorganic. They have, you know, soft fleshy bits on the inside and then metallic outer frames. Both of them have time limits. Ultraman can only be in his Ultraman form on Earth for 3 minutes at a time, whereas the Evangelion has a battery that's going to run out. So these are plot devices that come up over and over. So the backstory of Ultraman is that they are aliens that are giants made out of light. So this is another thing that you see repeated in Evangelion thematically. Like even the little the device on the chest there, the little circle, you can see in both of the silhouettes. The rebuilds make this especially explicit because rather than just having the one atom that's resurrected, they have 4 of them, and it's a little difficult to see in this image, but they're specifically modeled after the first 4 Ultramen. So you have, you know, the one with the dot on his forehead, the one with the extra line around the ring in the center, and then the symbols that are on the side there, those are the Ultraman's names in the Ultraman language. And in this pentagram, where they're doing whatever ritual they're doing, you can see they actually have each one of those symbols. It's not just the Evas, it's also the angels that take influence from these monsters. So you can sort of go through the roster of angels and do a one-to-one. We talked about Ramiel earlier, but you know, if you look at Sachiel versus Jamila, or Samshel versus Vera, or you know, the list goes on. Particularly the final monster is Zeruel, and the final monster in Ultraman is Zeton. Both of them start with a Z. That's how you know that they're final. They're, you know, got a similar aesthetic going on, and then because this is Japan, you can buy Moe anime girl figurines of both of them. Have a competition, see which one is best girl. References continue from there, though. If you look at like the architecture of Nerf headquarters, it's very similar to the the defense team in Ultraman's headquarters. It's this weird geometry where nothing's quite a straight line, or if it is, it's all askew. The type of car that Masato drives is the same as the official vehicle of the monster attack team in Return of Ultraman. And even the opening credits, they do this thing with a sort of vague background and a black silhouette. You see this in a lot of anime, and it's always going to be a reference back to the Ultraman opening credits because it's one of those iconic things that everyone in Japan is going to recognize. I'll do another one. We've got the ending to the second Rebuild movie where Shinji is diving through void to rip Rei out of her prison, and that's basically shot for shot exactly the same as the ending to Ultraman Nexus in 2004, which I would say, like, they clearly got it from this, except, like, well, maybe they also got it from Utena, because that also does the same thing.
Oh, wait a minute, did Utena come after that or before that?
Ultraman Nexus was 2004, so Utena would have been before that.
Oh, I wonder if they got from Utena.
Yeah.
If Ultraman got it from there.
Quite possibly. And that's the thing, like, it's circles within circles, so, you know, we'll have one thing reference another thing, reference the other thing, reference the first thing, and so on and so forth. Now, I know a lot of the people that are big into religious symbolism, they come to Evangelion for like, there's all of these crucifixions and terms taken from Bible and Apocrypha, and that's the revolutionary thing about Evangelion. And like, well, here's the thing: the creator of Ultraman was a Catholic, so he puts a whole lot of this imagery into his work, and then everybody who's since worked on the franchise has sort of done the same. So you have a lot of crucifixions throughout that series as well. Now, there's an anime series called Detonator Orgun that on the DVD box in the States, it actually says, "In the two-fisted tradition of Ultraman." This is another one that might have been an influence on Evangelion. We haven't gotten an official statement, but if you look at like the Evangelion concept art versus what the actual organ looks like, it's very similar. I mean, this is also just sort of the style in the early 90s. You know, if you look at like Tekkaman Blade or something, they have the huge shoulders and lanky bodies. But, you know, Organ also has like the cross-shaped attack and the shady dude posing like shady dudes gotta do. Gosh, I feel bad, but I gotta bring it back to Godzilla again. So in Godzilla vs. Megalon, this is actually a much more popular movie in the US than it is in Japan because it was public domain here for a while. It was on Mystery Science Theater and everything. There's this giant robot that's basically an Ultraman wannabe called Jet Jaguar. Originally, Jet Jaguar was proposed to be named Red Alone, but they sort of tweaked the design and they re-released it as, when they actually put it in the movie, as Jet Jaguar. So suddenly, there's this wannabe Evangelion that shows up in the series called Jet Alone. So that's where this comes from, including the big stupid smile that Jet Jaguar has. And this has since been referenced. If you watch Concrete Revolution, they have robots called Red Jaguar. So every permutation, Jet Alone, Red Alone, Jet Jaguar, Red Jaguar, you can get one of each. The whole Jet Alone storyline was actually then sort of cribbed by the creators of Godzilla for one of their own movies, where there's a plot where the robot monster goes out of control and they have to wait for the batteries to run out before they can stop it. And then both that and Jet Jaguar got figurines in Japan that were painted like Evangelion units. So it comes around and goes around. Another great monster series from the 90s is the Heisei Gamera trilogy. And Shinji Higuchi, while he was storyboarding Evangelion, he was also doing special effects on the Gamera movies. And Hideaki Anno was directing the making of the Gamera series as well. So you get these bits where one might have been referencing the other or vice versa. My favorite is in Gamera 3, Gamera gets his arm lopped off and he gets attacked by fire breath and he forms the fire into a giant fist. And this is the same thing that happens in the second Rebuild movie. On the other hand, there's a bit in the Evangelion TV series where they find a graveyard that's just full of dead Evas, and the same thing happens in the third Gamera movie where they find a graveyard that's full of dead Gameras. Another classic tokusatsu is Giant Robo, which I think some people are going to know the anime version. Both of them have this giant eyeball monster, and you get a motif that comes up in Evangelion with giant eyeballs. That's also shows up in Nadia as well. But think about the monster Mataral. What's the episode where that one attacks?
Power goes out.
Yes. The day Tokyo 3 stood still. The Giant Robo OVA is called The Day the Earth Stood Still. It's about all of the electricity in Japan being siphoned out. And this is, of course, a reference back to the 1951 American science fiction movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still, where an alien takes everybody's electricity away to get people to stop nuclear proliferation. There are a couple of other, classic mecha type of references. I mean, if you think about the archetype of how giant robot series go, in the original Gigantor, the main character gets a robot from his dad, and then in Mazinger Z, the main character gets a robot from his grandpa, and then in Gundam, the main character gets a robot that was built by his dad. So it sort of makes sense that Shinji gets a robot that was made by his dad. There's also other, types of classical callbacks. The opening when the robot is first introduced, and they turn on the lights and they're right by the face. There's something like this in the Mazinger Z manga also, but it's usually attributed to Combattler V here. Series that gets called out a lot in relation to Evangelion, because it's again one of Anno's favorites, is Space Runaway Ideon, which is by the creator of Gundam, but a lot chirpier. Basically this, and it's finally streaming in the US now, it's up on High Dive, so you can actually watch it. So this is a series where you have a robot that's actually an ancient god creature. It can, sort of awaken for itself and take over from the pilot. There are barriers that are formed based on emotional states. That's a little bit super robot-y, but in this it's made metaphysically scientific somehow. There's religious symbolism, and then, of course, there is the ending. So in the ending of Ideon, everybody dies because this is the creator of Gundam. And then there's this sort of weird, everybody's naked flying through space, and then they sing Happy Birthday. And if you think about the weird ending of Evangelion, you can sort of see what they were going for. Especially like in Japanese, Happy Birthday, they don't say it as Happy Birthday, they say congratulations on your birthday. So, congratulations. There are a few other things. There's this sequence from Brother Dear Brother that was recreated exactly, and actually it was funny when I was searching for images for Brother Dear Brother, the first thing that came up was this image of the train with a orangey background here that reminded me of Eva quite a lot. But there are actually a whole lot more Japanese inspirations that go into it. The Yukikaze series of novels, which is about a giant sentient space jet. Hajime-chan ga Ichiban has this sort of proto-Rei character. You can see him cold and emotionless and knocked down there like Rei was. The cartoon hamster Ebichu, which Anno actually went back later and he made an anime based on. This was something that was a popular manga that he was a fan of, so he took Yebichu as that brand of beer, and you can see the little hamsters on it there, so it's a call out. There's a bit in My Neighbor Totoro, which is another Miyazaki movie, where a character runs away and sort of sulks by a shrine. This is considered an inspiration for a similar scene that happens in Eva. The character Rei was named after Rei Hino, Sailor Mars. And the Ryu Murakami novel, the Fascism of Love and Fantasy, was something that a lot of characters got their names from. So Kensuke and Toji, like their full names are actually characters from that novel. But it's not all Japanese references. We still have the Western stuff to get through. Yes.
Speaking of names, I watched some of the 70s anime called Yusha Raiden, and there's a character in there who's named Asuka Rei, so I was like wondering if that may have had something to do with the namings in Evangelion. You think he got the names for that?
That's possible, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so they say that Rei is named after Sailor Mars, but you could make a lot of different cases there. Like Rei is also the Japanese word for zero and the Japanese word for ghost. Yeah. And like both of those also apply to the character, so they might have been, you know. But yeah, writing is something that they would have been watching, so I could definitely imagine that. Yeah, good point. So if you watch the Evangelion opening, it's lots of quick editing, lots of quick cuts. And this reminds me a lot of this British science fiction series. Let's see here. Hopefully the sound works. If you've seen the second Big O opening, this is also very similar. This is very similar to the way that the Japanese Ultraman series would go. Lots of miniature work, crazy science fiction things. This is a series that Anno has called one of his like top 5 television shows. So you might have noticed that there was this white-haired dude that was in the opening. He's sort of the main character of UFO, and he's a commander of this secret military organization that fights space aliens. And he's basically the prototype for Gendo. Like the character designer Yoshiyuki Sadamoto has basically said that. And if you look, he's got the penchant for sitting very contemplatively. He's got the jackets going on, and then his best accessory is of course his sidekick Freeman, who is the prototype for Fuyutsuki. But there's more that goes on in Evangelion that's sort of lifted from UFO, and these are just a handful of things that I found. But I suspect that there's many more out there. The things like the laboratory sign that has the red "do not" in front of the green "enter" that blinks on and off. The briefcase that says "destruct negative," which is, it sounds like it's English, but it showed up first in an English show, so I don't know if it really counts under that circumstances. The big boss in UFO is basically the same as the big boss in Evangelion that works for Zayla, and the spaceship that they use in the third movie, again, same model. So you can see similarities between the two. I mean, even like Nerf is a German word, but it's also an English word with a letter lopped off the end, and Shadow is an English word with a letter lopped off the end, and that's the organization that is in UFO. There's some more classic Western science fiction that gets cited as possible influences. The Andromeda Strain, based on the Michael Crichton novel, is about, spores from space that have this weird crystalline geometry to them. And in the episode where there's a computer virus that's taking over Nerf, it's a similar sort of visual representation between the two. The Andromeda Strain has these cuts to let you know what day it is, where it's just a black screen with white text, and Eva does the same thing. I think the best is code 601. I think they use the same font between the two even, when the computer doesn't know how to further analyze something. And then there's a scene where a character is on the phone, talks about some classified information, and gets interrupted with a message that's like, "Oh, thank you for complying with not talking about this information. Have a nice day." And hangs up. So that also happens in Eva. There's a shot in Eva that's a character riding on a nearly empty airplane to sort of give the feeling that the world has really gone south. And I don't know if that's a call out to the Andromeda Strain or if it's a call out to 2001: A Space Odyssey, because both of those have that going on. And 2001 also has a lot of influence on Eva. This is a series that deals with aliens in ancient times coming to Earth and influencing human evolution. Then there's a handful of like visual nods. Again, the tetrahedron that's blue is something that we have previously talked about in this very panel. Giant black obelisks, that's the communication method that they seem to go with for no reason other than that it's visually neat. And in 2001, there's even something called an Eva pod. That's a robot that they get around in. And in the Magma Diver episode, they make a suit that looks sort of similar to that. There's a little call out to the Madeline L'Engle story, A Wind in the Door, that is totally a blink or miss it thing, but you can see they reference Ferenduli there, which are fictional microscopic organisms. There's other call outs to the classic science fiction, the beast that shouted love at the heart of the world. There's an Evangelion episode, the beast that shouted I at the heart of the world. So. Instrumentality of mankind, that's a term that they use in Evangelion. It's not quite the same. And then the novel Childhood's End is all, again, about, creating that next step in human evolution, that Shinjinrui, as they call it in Japanese, which is something that you see in a lot of Japanese science fiction. It's sort of basically because after World War II, suddenly people were getting better nutrition. They're like, wow, the new generation, they're growing up as they're like stronger and taller than we used to be. This is clearly like they're going to turn into psychics. Yep.
So that also has a lot to do with the director left after a little while due to these sarin gas attacks that were perpetrated by the Shinrikyo death cult.
Yep.
In Tokyo, and they were very much into that same thing, the ascendancy of mankind into a new thing, into a new being that would have like psychic powers and all that crap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that attack had a big influence on a lot of pop culture. Like the Sentai series that was out that year was completely restructured because of it, and it's sort of like what happened after.
Well, we had like 3 episodes where he just wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, after Nadia, I'm sure they were used to episodes where Anno wasn't there. So for those who haven't seen Nadia, there's 10 episodes that take place on an island that Shinji Higuchi directed himself. He actually directed the whole back half of the series, but like, there's 10 episodes where nothing happens. One more sci-fi novel call out is that we see referenced a lot is the General Zapped an Angel. Now this art has actually been used on the cover of a couple different science fiction novels, so it's not clear if they just were inspired by the art or this particular novel or what. You know, the positioning there is very similar to Rosemary's Baby, the Roman Polanski horror movie. Again, about like a non-human next generation, just on a very much smaller scale. And then, of course, this was referenced by notable weeaboo Darren Aronofsky for the movie Mother that just came out. So this has just been talking about stuff that's in the Evangelion TV series and movies. There's all sorts. If you go to the expanded apocrypha out there, I love this page of the manga because they call out what Toji's midichlorian count is, which is those little L's in your blood in Star Wars that make you test positive for Jedi.
Where's the midichlorians?
Towards the bottom.
Yeah. Right here.
So, does that mean Toji would be able to beat Anakin Skywalker? You think he could beat him?
I don't know. Anakin's like the highest that's ever been tested, right?
You said it would get a really high midichlorian count. We don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, you know, 10 is a really high midichlorian count. Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, he's a monster.
Well, he does survive his ordeal in some versions of the story. I love the in one of the, I think it's a Girlfriend of Steel games, so there's an alternate ending where Shinji is rebuilt as a Robo Shinji, which is basically a Robocop call out. And there's, you know, the Evangelion collaborations with stuff. I pulled out Transformers here because it seems particularly goofy to me. But basically the idea is that, like, you're going to see stuff sometimes and you're going to be like, oh, is that an Evangelion reference? And like, yeah, probably it is. But Evangelion is also full of references also. So you can watch in Evangelion and be like, is that an Evangelion referencing something else? And it could be.
What's that picture in the middle bottom one from? I know I've seen that before, but I can't remember where.
That's from Spider-Man.
Oh, it's from Spider-Man? Oh.
Yeah.
For a long time.
There's just an Nausicaa on the left in there.
Cool. So we got plenty of time. I was hurrying here. So a lot of this I should credit where credit is due. The avageeks.org wiki and forum is amazing in terms of people going through this stuff and looking for little Easter eggs. And then if you want to check out other of my stuff, I have some other panels up on YouTube or a blog that I don't update very much because I'm working on a book right now. So. Yeah. Any discussion points?
Was there anything from Diebuster? That seems like something you sort of skipped.
As in Diebuster making references to Evangelion? Because Diebuster was like 20 years after Gunbuster.
Yes. But it was between the original series and the rebuild. I wonder if there's any feedback there.
I could see that. I haven't thought about it. I'd have to go back and rewatch.
Gunbusters seem to be more of like a proto-Gurren Lagann than a proto-rebuild to me.
It is a different team that's working on it, like director-wise and stuff, but like OG Gainax was in the room for Diebuster, so. But yeah, like the two series, while they're in the same continuity, they're like very different. But I mean, the rebuilds also feel very different to the original series. So there's a gradient there. So I could see it. And you know, Gainax references itself all the time. Like there's Evangelion nods in Panty and Stocking, for example. Cool. Well, I'll be around, and thanks for coming.